In this video, I'm going to be working through coded patterns. We're going to look at what they are and how they function on a human life template, or how the human life stages creates a template that the story is then built upon. Let's take a look. Jesus found his Buddha nature. Buddha found his Christ nature. These sound confusing. What are they? The Buddha nature and the Christ nature are the exact same thing, just in different analogous verbiage. They mean the same thing when you interpret it. If you don't interpret it, they don't mean the same thing. So I'll put it to you that way. It's like saying naked. If I don't interpret that, that means I've got my clothes stripped off. If I interpret it and say that's an analogous term meaning something about me spiritually, I'm naked spiritually, what does that mean? That means I'm uncovered from my shame, my pain, my judgments, my hurt, things like that. So that's what I mean when we're talking about these words. You have to understand that they're going to make some kind of a shift. My name is Dan Paulson. Welcome to the video. Somebody made a comment on this video that I had about the Buddha nature and Christ nature when Jesus found his. And there's something that was said in there that I want to point out. This is very critical, and I liked the individual's mind doing this. So let's take a look at it. It was from Jaron Toon Studios, and what I read here is, I believe Yeshua achieved Buddhahood after he defeated Mara 3 times in the desert. 1, when he tried to break his fast by convincing him to use his spiritual powers to turn stone to bread. 2, when he tried to convince him to throw himself off of a building with promise of safety. And 3rd, when he promised him wealth and materials, power, in return for worship and veneration. Yeshua passed them all with great difficulty, no doubt, and achieved enlightenment. Okay, I want to say that's a wonderful observation. I think other people, that's the story. But that 3 appears elsewhere. It's going to be a recurring motif in biblical stories, in Abrahamic material. We're going to find, for example, let's go to Exodus. What happens when God calls Moses? Okay, where we are in chapter 3, this is where Moses is at the burning bush and God is calling him. And we get down here, and in verse 4 it says, "And then the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see. God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And Moses replied back to him, Here am I, here am I, here I am," whatever. Anyway, okay, so down here, after God talks to him for a bit, Moses says to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt?" So he's not wanting to be, he's not me. Get down to 4. "And Moses answered and said, But behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice, for they will say, The Lord hath not appeared unto you. You didn't see God." So he's denying it a 2nd time. We have a 3rd time. "And Moses said to the Lord, And my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither heretofore nor since thou hast spoken unto my servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." I don't talk well. This is the 3rd time he said, I don't want to do it. So there's 3 times of a denial. We had 3 times there was a temptation. What else do we have? What I have is the book of Matthew up here, the King James Version. We're already down into chapter 26. Jesus already told Peter that before the cock crowed, you would deny me 3 times. And he said, no, I wouldn't. But here we are down here in verses 69 through 75. "Now Peter sat without in the palace." So Peter sat in the palace, and a damsel, nice girl, comes to him and says, "Hey, you were with Jesus of Galilee." But he denied before all of them, saying, "No, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what thou sayest. I don't know what you're talking about." And when he was gone out on the porch, another maid saw him and said to them that were there, "Hey, this fellow is also with Jesus of Nazareth." And again he denied with an oath, "I do not know the man." He denied with an oath, "I swear I don't know the man." So there's the 2nd denial. "And after a while came unto him they that stood by and said to Peter." So there was a couple people standing by. They must have been looking at him and thinking about it. After a while, they finally came up to him and said, "Surely you art one for them, for your speech betrayeth thee." So yeah, they must have been standing there for a while listening, and it's like, you sound like he sounds. You sound like they sound. You talk like they talk. "Then began he to curse and to swear, saying, I know not the man. And immediately the cock crew." So again he began to curse and swear, "No, damn it! I told you, I don't know the man." And Peter remembered the word of Jesus, which is said to him, before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. And he went out and wept bitterly. Okay, what does this mean? It doesn't mean anything. Those are just the threes. Those are going to be recurring motifs throughout Abrahamic material. They're part of a pattern that, to me, it seems obvious. To other people, it's just like, well, that's just the way it is. When in all reality, no, there's too many patterns like that. That's just one. The more you read, the more you continue to see patterns. Numbers being repeated, 3s and 7s and 40s and things like that. How many days is Jonah in the whale? 3 days. How many days is Jesus in the tomb? 3 days. There's patterns showing up in there. Okay, so let's talk about what's happening here. So the 3, I just wanted to point that out. That was a great observation, but continue to see it elsewhere. It's not in every story, but you will see it commonly. A 3-time denial. It represents something on a human life template. What it represents right there, what's happening right here, where is it happening when we look at Jesus and the Buddha? The temptation comes right after being under the Bodhi tree or in the desert. Now, the Buddha was under the Bodhi tree meditating until he reached enlightenment, and he had a very, restricted, minimal, if any at all, diet. He figured after that, okay, starvation is not the way to live, so he went and consumed after that. So he had a non-diet at that point. What do we get when we get to Jesus? We have him getting baptized, going into the wilderness for 40 days, observing prayer and meditation, or prayer and fasting, no diet whatsoever. And when Buddha completed his enlightenment, he was tempted by Mara. When Jesus completed his time in the desert, he was tempted by Satan. So those are the same recurring motifs. But you have to understand something. That is who you are. That is who the person is on the path. The story represents something to hang on to, but if you're the person that comes along and goes, you know what, that's a pathway right there for me. I'm supposed to pretend like I am. You don't become the Buddha. You don't become Jesus Christ. They're just terms held. You become somebody that is with them on that path, I guess you could say. Baptism represents crossing a threshold on a template. What this represents at this point in time on the human life cycle, when you're crossing a threshold, that means you're turning inward. You're realizing my problem in life is not because of that crap out there that happens. You're realizing, that keeps happening out there because of what I've accumulated up here and because of what I've become, and I'm continuing to project and to live life through this up here. I have to turn inward right here. That's crossing the threshold right there. Crossing the threshold, belly of the whale is where? Right up here. What am I with? My memories. Rape, incest, molestation, abuse, beating, worthless piece of crap. I hate, I love, we become all of those things right there. And we don't understand that we're living continually through those judgments, that they continue to cause our life to change. And so as we turn inward, we've learned that that's what we're doing. We're going after a memory. This is something that bothers me so much, I have to heal from it. And it takes a certain amount of time. Maybe you're breaking a habit. I can't stop doing this. And as soon as I try and I last a couple of days or a week or something, and boom, I fall right back into it. This is going through the desert or sitting under the Bodhi tree and then falling into temptation again. What this represents is a cyclical failure, a difficulty to leave. This temptation means, okay, you know what? You've left that behind. Now you're going to get tempted by it. Do you survive? And the story, you have to survive. If you don't, you go right back to, it's a failure cycle. Horrible story. The good story is to succeed. So you have to defeat the temptation. You have to defeat the habit. You got to make the changes. You got to break away from whatever you were doing, and it's final. It's done. I've left it behind. Nothing is going to bring me back there again. I've now defeated Mara. I've now defeated the temptation of Satan. That's what that represents right there. Now, that's not where the enlightenment happened. That's where we turned inward and began to engage with ourselves. Throughout Jesus' ministry is a healing process, one after another. And these represent things in our mind. And it's in a mental hierarchy. It's a very complex story, turning water into wine, all of those sorts of things. The teachings are about, the cup. I'm the cup. I wash the inside like I do the outside. It's about me, what I've become. What is that? That's my mind. It's my thoughts. How do I become poor in spirit? How do I forgive the ought against my brother to have a better flow in life? All of the teachings on this ministry are meant to go, okay, now that you've turned inward, let's get to work. You got to heal this. You got to heal that. You got to bring this back from the dead. You have to have these qualities along. You're going to have the disciples that each represents a different quality in the story. You're going to have the one that falls into temptation. You're going to have the doubter. We're going to have Judas. We're going to have all of those represent parts of us as you're turning inward that goes, yes, I'm going to defeat this. And then later you go, I don't think I'm going to make it. We're shifting around in who we are in the character in these stories. They're very rich and thick that way. When does his actual enlightenment happen? If we were looking at Joseph Campbell's template, in fact, let me bring it up here. Okay, it's important to understand that this is not complete and it's not accurate. It is. I can talk about that in more detail. You really have to study it. It's a great starting point, though, and it's very well known. The 17 stages of Joseph Campbell's monomyth. Now, I'm going to tell you that this is a human life. I'm going to turn inward and heal from a process cycle right here. It's a psychological process. It starts off with a call to adventure up here at the left, and this is us. That means it's you saying, damn it, I've had it. I got to fix this. I'm not doing this anymore. Refusal of the call. I don't want to. I got to deal with this stuff that I don't want to deal with. I hate it. It's shameful. It's hurtful. You're going to have that refusal of the call. That's what we saw with Moses when God was calling him. Call to adventure. Time to go. No, I don't speak right. I'm not the right person. They won't believe me. They're going to call me a liar. That's the refusal of the call happening right there. Supernatural aid, that's when he got his staff. The supernatural aid is not really there. It's knowledge. Everybody has it. Jesus comes bundled with supernatural aid. Here's what we have to do, and this is what it's kind of weird to understand. What we're doing is we're changing the frequency of something in a manner of speaking. But what it is the memories, the thoughts, the perceptions. It's an internal healing process. And the supernatural aid it's not supernatural. What it is natural. It represents the knowledge necessary to interact with the memories in such a manner that they cease to be something that is derogatory to your continued life. We can see through cause and effect, they're continually causing us problems. How do we resolve that? We have to turn inward to do that. And we're going to go, we've got a memory and a perception. The perception is what gives it its emotional value. To change the emotional value, since we can't change the event, we have to change the emotional value, which means we have to change the perception, the mental perception. Once that's done, we're healed. But that takes very specific work. Crossing first threshold. What is that? I just turned inward. I got it. Okay, I see. This is what I have to go deal with. I'm turning inward. Belly of the whale, I'm in my brain. This is where I have to spend 3 days resolving things. 3 just means like a time. It's a pure time. Road of trials. This represents the idea now that we're going to start going through all of these things. If you went through Jesus material, it's the healing process, the bringing somebody back from the dead, the turning water into wine, all of the stories along the way, the man of the tombs. We're the man of the tombs. There's part of us that are full of these, there's so much in there. All of the stories are rolling along that are just repetitively telling us that this is you in some manner. You cannot put new wine into an old wineskin. You must put new wine into a new wineskin. Otherwise, you know the story. You're the wineskin. You cannot put what is wine? Wine experience of life in a wineskin. Okay, so how does this unwrap then? You cannot put new life experience into your old, unhealed self. Otherwise, it's going to ruin the new life experience and make your old self even worse. You, however, can put new wine into a new wineskin, then they'll both be preserved. Before moving on ahead, I've healed myself from here. That way I'm not stepping into some place where I'm going to reconnect with where that unresolved stuff is going to cycle again. So these are all very important processes. And as we go through here, there's certain things like, temptation. There's an atonement with the Father. I don't get where that is. That's one of those things I think he's got an error with. God reappears at the beginning of the calling. That's who the Father is. We're dealing with a mental hierarchy. A Father, a consciousness, a God, something like that, that's the higher self. That's where you sit from up here and go, I'm not my memories. Life's okay from here. How come I keep getting sucked into my memories? What we're doing right there is experiencing the higher awareness, the consciousness shifting around, and the memories themselves, the female portion of us. And let me be clear on that, because I don't like that verbiage. We don't have a female portion. This is a hierarchy for every human being. Everybody's consciousness is Adam. Everybody's inner being is Eve. And the reason Eve sins and has feels pain through childbirth is because that's where the seeds are planted for things to continue to come out. It's not really a female side, just in a hierarchy in Abrahamic material. That's how it's held. It's really just your inner being, your subconscious, your bundle of memories, the odd against your brother, the mote in your eye. We want to reconnect with the goddess. That means the inner self. I am now, instead of denying these things, I'm going to face these things. I'm reconnecting with the goddess at that point. It's in Abrahamic material, it's a marriage in a bridal chamber up here, metaphorically. Okay, then we're going to go through here. But what we see is that there's that's supposed to be apotheosis. That's a change. The ultimate boon, I've healed now. I've resolved my issue. Okay, I'm not that victim. I'm okay. I'm all right. Yeah, it's all good. I'm going to live. I feel elevated above the ground. Oh my God, does it feel good to get that off of me and to admit to it and to resolve it and to be free of it? Oh my gosh, does it feel good? Magic flight, you're going to cross a return threshold. That means you're going back from now my inner healing self. I'm back out to life, and it's good out here. And what do we have? Master of two worlds and freedom to live. Master of two worlds and freedom to live. That's where enlightenment happens, that crossing of the return threshold. So what we see here, when we're dealing with Jesus, where he went in, where he was baptized and spent in the desert, right here we've got that's crossing the first threshold and belly of the whale. Road of trials, he was tempted right after that. What happens at the end of his ministry? He crosses the return threshold. The return threshold then is what? That's the crucifixion. That's when it represents dying to your first self and resurrecting as an enlightened self on earth now. We have to separate ourselves from the idea that we're so conditioned that Jesus is some sort of a supernatural returning savior or something, and that's the way the story is written for most people to believe, because they're going to believe that. To be a Buddhist would be very hard. To follow Jesus' path, if you understood his teachings, is the same path as a Buddha path. But both of those paths, if you really look at them, it's not a Buddhism, it's not a Christian thing. It's a mental thing. It's a psychological process that is a human process. You don't give it a label of religion. Religion will carry it, and religion provides a lifestyle for humans on earth. It provides many things. But at all times, if you stop and turn inward with the material, you'll find that there's an inward path that is not at all the outward path. So looking outward, looking to Jesus, looking at him as a supernatural thing, waiting for him to return. As long as you're a Christian, you can't interact with the material, because in your mind you must go, I am Jesus in the beginning. Now I am going to cross the threshold. I'm going to work on resolving all of these things until I go through my own resurrection and become the Christ. In the same way that if I was doing it in Buddhism, I have to turn inward and find a way to, instead of become poor in spirit, I'm seeking emptiness. The measure you mete unto others will be likewise meted unto you as karma. All of these are the same things, but they're in, one of them in English Buddha translation, pretty plain language, or a Judeo-Christian religious genre verbiage. But they're both saying the same thing. The measure you mete unto others will be likewise meted unto you. Why would that sound like it comes from God? That's karma. Yeah, we're living through these experiences, these mental experiences up here is what that means. And then after we go through our time under the Bodhi tree, we face the temptation, then we go off and have our entire life experiences, and in the end we die and we float off up into some places, it's really the same story, but it represents the human, but it represents life. And the life and death does not represent physical life and after life after you die. It represents life here on now, the death of I'm living while judging life experiences, not self-aware that I am having to stop doing that, resolve those things, and live from my higher self in order to find peace. That's what and then that's the resurrection. That's the rebirth right there. Okay, so I wanted to say that. I saw what you were doing, and I saw some things you said that I wanted to address, and I thought, boy, it's a perfect time to add in a lot of detail. I don't think people follow along very well with this. It's very it's a foreign concept to people today. But it's exactly what it is. Jesus is a Buddha character, absolutely, bar none. However, Christians don't like the sound of that. They will live life waiting to die. It's a comfortable thing. It's really a way to just not even look at something that's coming, yet still feel good about it, which is fine, except that it goes and does other things, doesn't it, too? Boy, I get Christians, it depends on who they are. It depends on the person. I get people that come at me with Christianity that just sound like evil, violent, want to kill me because I've had experiences where Jesus didn't answer my prayers. So you tell people that, and it's Christianity is not all it's cracked up to be. I think that it has played a significant role in what I'm calling, the decay of America, the values. Not everybody that's Christian voted for Trump, but Trump is in place because of a lot of conservative Christianity, really Fox conditioned here. You live remote. I'm going to tell you what life is about. They get programmed that way. Got no idea what the world is. Everybody's an enemy. They don't see what they're doing. Reproduce, more. Everybody has to reproduce. You can't get an abortion. What your kids doing on the streets? Now we're going to put them in jail. They should be shot. They should get death penalty. What the hell's going on? People aren't thinking in we got a flow going on here. And the flow is not being interrupted. And Christianity denies the flow. It does. It looks to something very self-centered and selfish on behalf of the individuals. And they can say, no, we're very outgoing. Yeah, to your group, to the people that are like you, not to the other tribes. You don't encompass humanity. You encompass your religion. All right. Well, I kind of I get on my high horse sometimes here because I think it's important to try to understand these things. But Christianity is something that if you look at the story of Jesus, it's like that's the story of Jason and the Argonauts. It's the story of Moses. The Israelites cross the Red Sea, spend 40 years in the desert. Jesus gets baptized, spends 40 days in the wilderness. What's the same? Desert, wilderness, devoid places, 40. That's how long the flood took, 40 days, 40 nights. It's a purification process. How long does it, till the time it takes? I've got to resolve this. Does it take a day or two? Does it take a year or two? That's 40. All right, so if you can fathom what's going on here, it's almost like you're taking your brain and saying, this is a gaming platform. And every time I grab a story, that is loading in the game cartridge right up here. However, what I must do to play this game, because it's antique, because if it's old, we have to play it out in the mind. This is where it works. So you close your eyes and you say, I am that person. His wife is my inner self. God is my higher awareness. Pharaoh represents life experience. The reason Sarai takes on corruption from Pharaoh and I get animals and slaves for it represents metaphorically the idea that this is me living in life, moving on from a place of famine where God put me. I'm born in a place where there's no knowledge. So I move on from there and I gain life experience. And as a result, I'm hurt. I gather up things. Slaves, animals, and sloppy seconds, right? If you don't interpret it, yeah. But if you interpret it, you go, no, that represents the idea that I have now become corrupt and I'm moving along in stages in life. You have to play it out that way in the mind in order for it to work. And you have to have the right imagination that's going to do that. Here's another really huge 3 temptation. I'll just throw this on there because it helps me remember them as I find them or think about them when I'm doing videos like this. It's the Abraham, Isaac transition, the very beginning of Abrahamic traditions. Abram and Sarai represents each of us when we're first starting out in life. When we're converted to Abraham and Sarah represents when we go, okay, I got to turn inward. What I have to do is destroy what's up here. Sodom is up here. I have to turn inward to go do that. What happens after they die is they have as time goes on, they have a son named Isaac. Now, if you looked at each one of the stories, you're going to see that from Abram and Sarai, God was not present. And they succumbed to temptation, gave in to Pharaoh, got animals and slaves, and God, in the end, after the fact, sent plagues to resolve the issue, and then Pharaoh realizes they lied. He didn't even know it. God's punishing Pharaoh when he should be punishing Abram and Sarah. Well, this is kind of weird. How come Pharaoh is the one getting punished when he's doing the right thing? He gets mad and tells him, take all your stuff and get out of here. Okay, so that happened right there. As after God converts him to Abraham and Sarah, when he converts them, in fear, he does the same thing to a king this time. However, what happens is this. The king takes him in, but before he marries Sarah, before he actually does the union or anything like that, God intervenes and stops him. This time, God's there. He's not present and has to send plagues. This time, God's there and says, whoa, nope, stop. This is a good guy. Don't do that, or punishment. And the king has to tell him, you know what? I'm sorry, but please don't do anything. They lied to me. They told me that was his sister, and she even agreed. And God realized that. So that's a weird thing. The same person did it. Again, only God intervened and stopped it before it happened. Now, what happens with Isaac is they get to another place, and the same thing occurs, and they say the same thing. She's my sister, so that they won't kill me. She's beautiful, and I think people are going to kill me because of Rebecca. So we'll lie and say that. But the king looks out the window and sees them kissing in the courtyard someplace. And before even taking her in, he realizes, wait a minute, that's not right. How come you told me she's your sister when I see you kissing her? She's clearly your wife. So what we have is the same thing happening. But if you look at that, you'll see there's 3 times that happened. That's it. There's 3 occurrences. Each one has a slight variation to it. First, there was, you give into it, God wasn't there. Second time, you give into it, but God was there to stop it. The third time, it doesn't even really get underway. These are iterations of us. At first, we fail. We gather up all those things. Then we become Abraham. We destroy Sodom, metaphorically. We destroy our early selves. The temptation happens again, but before we succumb to it, it's stopped. Finally, in the end, as the temptation comes after us, we don't succumb to it. So it shows an iteration. Each one of those are iterations of us, changing as life goes by. And the experiences that we have, if we're healing, 3 times right there. We went from giving into it to temptation to no longer giving into temptation. Magical stories. All right, I hope these are fun and interesting. You know what? I cannot look at that story and say that's factual. There's no possible way. However, to say it's just baloney and made up, you're not looking at patterns that are in there. That is actually mythological material, but it's put on a template that is the human life template. That if you followed it along, it's a lot more complex than what Joseph Campbell came up with. And his is the healing. His starts where Abraham and Sarah come into being. Chapter 17, where the calling happens. He missed completely chapter 12 up to there. What happens that leads up to the calling? There's not many of those. We've got one in Adam and Eve up to chapter 6, when the destruction has to happen. We've got one here, 12 to 17. These are the human life cycles that happen before the calling. Joseph Campbell. If I said Joseph Smith before, I'm wrong. I've been doing work with Mormon stuff too. Okay, Joseph Campbell did not find that one even. He didn't see everything exactly perfectly. However, I will tell you this, that I personally have interacted with this material. He had a good life. He never had to. He observed it by just seeing the repetitions. He understood they were psychological processes, but he didn't have it isolated and broken down. There's some very critical ones that are missing it from his. Cyclical pain and struggle to leave the past. Those are parts of the stories. Leaving Pharaoh, plagues continually happening. You can go, no you can't. You can go, no you can't. That's cyclical pain and struggle to leave the past. Those story elements he missed. Think of your own life. Why do you go on the path? Why do you say, I'm turning inward? Cyclical pain. And it's a struggle to do it. That way he did the denial. He might have been identifying the denial with the struggle. But the cyclical pain, that's the reason we go on the path. It's incredibly important. Cyclical pain is a part of it. The repeated pain in childbirth, plagues, rolling boulders uphill, getting liver eaten out and having it grown back, all of them are going to hold elements of like, what is that weird thing right there? Those are the cyclical pain elements. The Nibiru will come by every once in a while and causes destruction, the weird old stuff, which is actually modern stuff. All right, well, okay, hope the video was informative. It gets deep. I realize that. And I just don't have anyone to talk to, so here it goes. Blabbing to a camera. Hope it was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, feel free. See you in the next one.